For months at a time, Oregon State University archaeology students worked to uncover secrets from the past. For 10 years, they set up along the Salmon River near where the borders of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho all meet.
Imagine discovering evidence so unbelievable that scientists tested again and again, convinced the first result had to be wrong. That's exactly what happened in a quiet cave in southern Oregon. What researchers uncovered challenged one of archaeology's oldest beliefs about when humans first reached North America. If the evidence is correct, history didn't just miss a few details, it may have gotten the entire timeline wrong. The Oregon discovery that challenged history. The story begins at the Paisley Caves, a group of dry rock shelters in Oregon's high desert. Archaeologists had known about the site for decades, but few expected it to change the story of the first Americans. When researchers from the University of Oregon dug deeper into the cave, they weren't searching for treasure or ancient monuments. Instead, they uncovered preserved human coprolites, or ancient human waste. It may not sound exciting, but Oregon's dry climate had preserved something priceless: human DNA. Scientists extracted mitochondrial DNA from the samples and found genetic markers linked to Native American founding lineages. The people who once sheltered in these caves were connected to the ancestors of indigenous communities living in the Americas today. Then came the biggest surprise. Using accelerator mass spectrometry, researchers dated the samples to more than 14,000 years old. Because the method dates the organic material itself, it provides stronger evidence than simply dating the surrounding soil. Those results placed humans in Oregon at least 1,000 years before the Clovis culture, long believed to be the first people in North America. For decades, the Clovis first theory dominated archaeology. According to that model, humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge around 13,000 years ago before spreading across the continent. Paisley Caves suggested the story wasn't that simple. Not everyone accepted the discovery at first. Some questioned the dating, while others suspected contamination. But repeated testing continued to support the original findings, making the evidence increasingly difficult to dismiss. The most remarkable part wasn't what researchers found, it was what it revealed. No temples, no gold, and no spectacular artifacts. Just a simple biological trace that survived long enough to rewrite a chapter of human history. But one discovery alone wasn't enough to convince everyone. Then, just 70 miles away, another Oregon site uncovered evidence that made the debate impossible to ignore. Could this second discovery finally prove that the first Americans arrived much earlier than anyone had imagined? The second Oregon site that strengthened the case. If Paisley Caves had been the only discovery, many archaeologists could have dismissed it as an unusual exception. But another site in Oregon soon added powerful evidence to the debate. About 70 miles away sits Rimrock Rock Shelter near Riley, Oregon. For years, archaeologists carefully excavated the site, uncovering little more than stone flakes and animal remains. Then they found something far more important than a fossil: a layer of volcanic ash. Scientists linked the ash to an eruption of Mount St. Helens around 15,500 years ago. Because volcanic ash settles across the landscape at one moment in time, it acts like a natural timestamp. Anything buried beneath it must be older than the eruption. Below that layer, researchers uncovered fossils from an Ice Age world, including extinct camels and giant bison. Then they discovered a carefully shaped stone tool made from orange chalcedony. It wasn't just the tool that impressed researchers, it was the wear. The edges had been polished through years of use, showing it wasn't made for a single hunt. Someone had carried, sharpened, and relied on it for everyday survival before leaving it behind thousands of years ago. Then came the dating. The animal remains above the tool were estimated to be 21,000 to 22,000 years old. Since the tool lay even deeper, it suggested people may have been using the shelter even earlier. The team repeated the tests to rule out mistakes. The results stayed the same. Even more surprising, the tool didn't resemble the famous Clovis spear points. Instead, it belonged to the Western stem tradition, a completely different style of stone technology. That detail mattered. If these tools were older than Clovis and made using different techniques, they likely belonged to a separate population with its own traditions and history. Now Oregon had produced two independent discoveries pointing toward the same conclusion: ancient DNA from Paisley Caves, geological evidence, and early tools from Rimrock Draw. Together, they suggested that people may have reached North America much earlier than once believed. But two sites in one state still weren't enough to settle the debate. Researchers needed evidence from across the continent. Fortunately, that's exactly what they began to find. As more discoveries emerged hundreds of miles from Oregon, would they support these findings or completely change the story once again? The discoveries that expanded the story. Even with two remarkable sites in Oregon, many archaeologists remained cautious. Extraordinary claims require strong evidence, and two locations weren't enough to rewrite decades of accepted history. Then similar discoveries began appearing across North America. One of the earliest came from Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania. After years of careful excavation, researchers dated human occupation to 16,000 to 19,000 years ago, well before the Clovis culture. The findings immediately sparked debate. Some scientists questioned the dating methods, while others suspected contamination. But as more early archaeological sites were discovered, Meadowcroft no longer looked like an isolated case. Then another remarkable discovery pushed the timeline back even further. At White Sands National Park in New Mexico, researchers uncovered more than 60 ancient human footprints preserved in the sediments of an Ice Age lakebed. Unlike stone tools, footprints capture a single moment in time. Adults and children once walked across soft ground, leaving behind tracks that survived for thousands of years. Researchers first dated seeds found within the same layers, estimating the footprints to be 21,000 to 23,000 years old. Critics challenged those results, suggesting the seeds may have contained older carbon. So scientists tested different materials, including ancient pollen and organic mud from the same layers. The results remained remarkably consistent. Those repeated studies strengthened the case that humans were living in North America during the height of the last ice age. Even more fascinating, the footprints appeared alongside tracks left by mammoths and giant ground sloths, showing humans and Ice Age animals sharing the same landscape. By then, Oregon no longer seemed like an exception. It had become part of a growing pattern. Another controversial discovery came from Southern California, where construction workers uncovered the remains of an extinct mastodon. Researchers suggested the broken bones and nearby stones might show evidence of human activity dating back roughly 130,000 years. However, unlike the Oregon discoveries or White Sands, this site remains highly debated, and many archaeologists are not convinced by the evidence. Even so, it highlights just how much remains unknown about the earliest people in the Americas. Today, many researchers no longer ask whether humans arrived before Clovis. Instead, they're asking a much bigger question. If people were already living across North America thousands of years earlier than once believed, how did they get here, and what route did they actually take? A new theory of how the first Americans arrived. For generations, history books taught that the first Americans crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia about 13,000 years ago before moving south through an opening in the ice sheets. It was a simple explanation, and for decades it became the accepted story. But discoveries from Oregon and other archaeological sites suggest the journey may have been far more complicated. If people were already living in North America thousands of years before the Clovis culture, they may have arrived by a different route. One of the strongest ideas is the coastal migration theory. Instead of traveling through the continent's interior, early groups may have followed the Pacific coastline by boat, moving from one shoreline to the next while relying on marine resources. Evidence from other parts of the world shows that ancient humans were capable of crossing open water much earlier than once believed. Genetic studies also suggest there may have been multiple waves of migration, helping explain why Oregon's oldest tools differ from classic Clovis technology. The Paisley Caves revealed ancient human DNA. Rimrock Draw produced early tools beneath a well-dated volcanic ash layer. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter and White Sands National Park added further evidence that humans may have reached North America much earlier than once believed. Together, these discoveries suggest the story of the first Americans is still unfolding. While many questions remain unanswered, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The history of the first Americans is far more complex than anyone imagined. Oregon's discoveries remind us that science is always evolving as new evidence comes to light. What do you think? Did the first Americans arrive by land, by sea, or another route? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more fascinating discoveries.